Please subscribe to hear more Cryptid Tales. If you like the story you heard, give us a thumbs up and feel free to leave us a comment. If you'd like to hear your own cryptid encounter on Cryptid Tales, send us an email at cryptidtalesmail@gmail.com. I will start this story and tell you this is my very first encounter with a Sasquatch. I was 18 years old, and it was 1972 in November. I had just managed to be able to get strong enough and old enough to get a job as a floor hand on a very large standard derrick drilling rig here in Louisiana. These jobs usually are 12 hours on and 24 hours off, 7 days a week. When you have one of these jobs, you must be very dependable because every man is important and have important jobs to do, and there are no excuses for even being late. There were many people wanting these jobs and lots of competition for them. You better be in top shape to do the job, and as you work, you will become extremely strong from the toughness and the physical requirements of the job. I started out at 180 pounds, and when I quit to go into the service, I weighed 212, and I didn't have an ounce of fat on me. I had huge shoulders and arms and legs, and I really looked more like a Mr. Universe competitor. As a matter of fact, I was asked if I wanted to try out for the Navy SEALs right before I got out of boot camp, but I would have had to re-enlist and added 6 more years on my enlistment if I decided to go try it. I declined, and I've regretted it ever since. Anyway, we were drilling deep into the Atchafalaya Basin, and it took you about 5 miles driving on a board road to get to the location. These board roads can be 6 to 10 boards deep, just to be able to handle the weights that had to get into the swamp. The location was a huge board square that was probably 10 to 12 boards deep. The board roads are made of all hardwood, and each board is 2 inches thick and is put together with huge nails. You can't believe how strong these wooden pads are to be able to hold up to the weight of a huge drilling rig and all the associated equipment. The only thing I ever knew that would move them or make them vibrate is when the rig was running or drilling. When the rig has completed its drilling and the well is completed, the rig may stay on location for a few days until it's time to break it down and move to the next location, wherever that might be. It may be 200 yards away or 200 miles away, but it sits there with nothing but the generator running, and someone has to pull rig watch every night. They get paid good money, and all you have to do is monitor the generator and make sure it stays running. There are 2 generators, so you are never without power. All of the other men on my crew were family men and wanted to stay with their families in the downtime, and I didn't blame them because they had seldom much time for quality time with their families, the way our schedules worked when the rig was running. So, the junior man, me, got the duty, and I didn't mind because I had the tool pusher shack to myself, and I was making overtime. I was saving up for a new car, so this was great. A long time ago, it was just a fiberglass building that was brought in on a truck and had 2 beds in it, with a rudimentary small kitchen and the 2 beds. But things were starting to get more modern, and the shack was a complete 70-foot long 3-bedroom, 2-bath mobile home with 2 rooms converted into office space and a communications network. But it had all the amenities of modern living, such as a microwave, television, etc. Back then, there were only about 4 channels you could watch anyway. You had to be on location by 5 p.m. before the area production operator for Texaco, who we were drilling for, left and locked up the gate to the main entrance to this very big oil and gas field we were drilling in. After that, he would open the gate at 5 a.m. unless there was other trucks that needed to get in for other rigs operating in the area. He had a very nice house/camp that had his own private living area but it was pretty big and could readily accommodate about 30 other men if need be. It had a huge kitchen for catering if there were contract people that were working on pipelines and such, and he was about 4 miles from me. You had to go outside and make a fire watch/generator check at least every hour. There was a little logbook where you logged in the fuel tank level, generator operating parameters, etc. Just a general information log where you placed anything usual or unusual. I was on my 11 p.m. hourly round, and as soon as I walked out the door of the mobile home, I felt the presence of someone watching me. I made my rounds, and the closer I got to finishing it, the faster I was moving trying to get back into that house. By the time I stepped into the trailer house, my heart rate was pounding. I calmed myself down and started watching TV, but I had then the next hour on my mind the whole time. It just so happened that the tool pusher, who's the rig manager, had a Colt Python 357 Magnum in its holster, just hung up in a closet of his bedroom, along with a Remington tube-fed .22 automatic. Both had plenty of ammo. There were 2 full boxes of Remington ammo for the Python, and the holster was full, and several 50-round boxes of Winchester Super X hollow point .22 long rifle ammo. I made sure both were loaded to full. 6 rounds in the Python, and 17 rounds in the Remington .22. I put the 357 around my waist, and the bullet retainers were full of extra rounds. I think there were 25 rounds in the holster belt retainers. I stepped out of the house, and no sooner than I did, there was a thunderous growling scream that almost made me piss my pants. It scared me so badly I went back in the house and stood by the door a few feet away from it and locked it. There was a back door, but it had been rigged with a 1/4-inch steel sliding flat bolt that was not going to be easily opened by anyone or anything, so I knew nothing was likely to come in from there. The main door had also been fitted with a smaller, easier operating steel bolted slide that definitely would be hard to open. Why they had done this, I guess it was to make sure that these doors did not come open when they are moving the house from location to the other, but the locks were toys. It could be slid from outside as well as inside, but the locks on a mobile home are really flimsy as well as the doors, because they are made out of aluminum. But they are laminated and are pretty strong, considering the abuse they go through with all the guerrilla roughnecks coming through them every day. I put the steel pin in the slide, so it couldn't be slid open from outside. There was a pin on the outside too, but it was never used until we moved the house. The rig welders had fashioned an access stairs from steel and expanded metal that had a railing and 4 steps to get into the trailer when it was on location. And it was pretty heavy. I'd say at least 750 to 1,000 pounds. The trailer always stayed with the tires left inflated, and the trailer had 4 screw-type leveling tripods, 1 for each corner of the frame. Getting back to the story, it was my time to make the rounds, and I didn't want to lose my job over something so trivial as not making an hourly round. It wasn't likely that the generator was going to go down because it was hooked up to a 1,000-gallon diesel tank, and it had a 30-gallon oil tank with an automatic level controller. But it still needed to be checked in case something like a leak developed on anything. You would be surprised to find out just how much diesel can be lost from a small leak or coolant or oil, etc. We only had a few lights on around the location, and I wanted to go turn on all of the big area lights around the location and flood the place with light after hearing that scream. I was hoping that whatever it was would be driven off by the floodlights. These were some pretty powerful lights that would even reach into the surrounding swamp a ways. I got up the courage to go out again and was making my way to the generator shack. I was about 10 feet from it when I got another scream, but this one sounded way to my right and deeper in the swamp. But it was no less unnerving, just a little farther away. I got to the generator and the breaker box and flipped on 4 50-amp breakers that the big lights were on, and the whole place lit up like daylight. The second I hit the lights, it sounded like several bulldozers moving away from the location in different directions, but without the diesel engines running. You could hear splashing and breaking of tree limbs, and grunts and whoops, all moving away from the rig. Eventually it all calmed down, and there wasn't a sound heard except from the generator. I finished my round and went back to the trailer and felt like I had dodged a bullet. I made 2 more rounds without any kind of incident or sound, so I started getting relaxed again. It was 4 a.m. and time for another round, and I couldn't wait to get it and the next round over with so I could start seeing the sun coming up around 6 a.m. I was about to flip the pin on the door lock and walk outside when something hit the side of the trailer on the front corner, and I thought it knocked the trailer off the front jacks, and the whole house went way over enough to knock down anything and everything that was standing up in the house, including me. I fell with my head hitting the corner of the bottom of the couch on the opposite side of the house. That was lucky because it didn't really hurt. It just made me see stars for a second. As I laid there, something seemed to have the front of the trailer house in its grip, and it started swinging the whole house back and forth like it was trying to turn it over. I could hear the other 2 jack stands come out from underneath the back, and the set of tires, which there were 4 sets of axles and 8 tires, that I could hear a kind of a squealing as the house moved back and forth. This went on for just a few seconds, but it felt like minutes going by. Then that stopped, and the opposite end of the house got a huge whop on the corner that moved the whole house and little into a different angle when it stopped moving. I heard something that sounded like metal being bent and moved along the board road as it was drug. Then I heard a crash, like something large and metallic hit a tree and bounced to hit another tree and then hit the mud. At first I thought that somehow a woman was outside being attacked by something, because it sounded just like a woman would scream out in terrified fright, until the sound changed, and the tone went into a great, powerful, huge sound that penetrated everything and hit my body and made my whole insides tremble. On the previous round I had made, I thought that I could just barely make out movements in several different places, but were just outside of my ability to actually see anything other than large dark shapes that just barely were recognizable as movements. I also saw what I thought were raccoons that were in some trees pretty high up from their eye glint, but it was strange because all I got to see was just one eye. That was rather freaky to me. I didn't come out of the house until it got completely bright morning outside, and only when I heard the familiar sound of the lease operator making his rounds after he opened the main gate up the road a few miles. When I knew his truck was outside is when I went to see what had transpired. As I opened the door, I saw the big steps were nowhere to be seen, and you could see where it had been drug a little way away from the house, along with some muddy, super large, muddy, barefooted footprints all over the area around the house. Evidently, one of these creatures had either stumped its foot on one of the large spike nails that was sticking up, and the head bent over hard enough to cut its foot. There was quite a lot of blood with that one foot as it walked around. It was really easy to follow where it went around the location. If you are talking about the front of a mobile home and the rear, the front is where the towing is done. Right at the front corner, at the top of the house on the same side as the front door, you could see that about a foot from the end, there are 2 places that look like huge hands had grabbed this trailer. And there are 2 places that are completely caved in on the top and the side of the top corner of the structure. You could actually see where the fingers had sunk into the top and the thumbs had sunk into the bottom, like it was gripping a stick. You could distinctly make out the indentations of each appendage as it crushed that corner of the house. You could also see where his shoulder evidently pushed in the wall about 6 inches. It was about 6 feet in diameter, right under where he had grabbed the house. The house was completely out of line. The water line, which was made of PVC pipe, was broken in about 3 places, and the 4 tripod screw levelers were all turned over. 2 of the tires on the house were flat. The crazy thing was that the stairs that weighed 750 to 1,000 pounds were completely bent, all out of shape, and were 200 yards into the swamp. And you could see where they hit a tree about 60 feet up, an old bald cypress, and glanced off and hit another tree about 30 feet away, just a little further below where it hit the first tree. I'd say about 6 feet lower on the second tree before it hit the mud, more than 100 feet away from the second tree. That took some power to do that. This was my 4th night watching the rig, and we were scheduled to start tearing down and move into a new location that day. When the crew and the tool pusher got there, they could not believe what they were seeing. The operator that got there that morning was taking pictures for the company we were contracted to, and told the tool pusher that this was not the first time something like this had happened. And by the way, it has happened on and off for as long as he has been there. He had over 20 years just in that field. They didn't let me watch the rig again until we were out of the swamp in a different kind of an environment, but that was fine with me. By the way, this is the reason that I always carried an AK-47 with a 30-round magazine after this encounter.